Пиздец, это беспилотник. Сбили, бабахнуло в 2 раза, взорвалось, падает. Ты посмотри, падает. Блядь. Где, блядь, бабахнет? Куда упал? Вон тут куски летят. Где-то, блядь, упал. Хуя дым пошел какой. А там он куски летят еще. Смотри, какой клуб поднимается. Пиздец. Меня аж трясет. Охуеть. Где это? Блядь, не видать нихуя. Вон. Около фермы. Горим. Не пойму, у фермы нет.
YOUXERNET.com, your all-in-one platform for learning, creativity, and business.
Reporting to show the plane actually falling out of the sky. Russia's Federal Agency for Air Transportation is reporting that the founder of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was listed among the passengers, but it's unclear if he actually boarded the plane.
Now, Russian officials say that all 10 people on board that craft, including 3 crew members, were killed. And remember, Prigozhin had been leading troops fighting for Russia in Ukraine when he decided to lead that aborted mutiny against Vladimir Putin a couple of months ago. After the rebellion, which has kind of fizzled out, Russian media reported Prigozhin had been relocated to Belarus. So ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burge joins us now from Kiev, along with ABC News national security and defense analyst and former CIA operative Mick Mulroy. They join us now. So first, Tom, what are you hearing there? We've heard that so far 8 bodies have been recovered from the crash site. Well, what are you hearing on the ground?
Yeah, Terry, we know that Yevgeny Prigozhin's private jet left a major Moscow airport at about 3 p.m. local time. We know that it went down minutes later. We're seeing that video, which appears to show debris or parts of the plane literally plummeting from the sky. So I'm not sure it's, at this point in time, we can definitively say that the plane crashed. There are lots of reports, unconfirmed reports, about the possible cause of this incident. We'll come to that in a second. But what we know from Russia's state federal aviation regulator is that Yevgeny Prigozhin's name was on the flight list. We know that there were 10 passengers listed as being on that plane. We know that 8 bodies have been recovered from the scene. We cannot definitively say at this point in time whether Yevgeny Prigozhin, this highly controversial figure who has led his mercenary group around the world, in Africa, it's been accused of vile human rights abuses, and crucially was fighting here in Ukraine with Yevgeny Prigozhin weeks ago going on that mutiny against the Kremlin, really against his former ally, President Putin. We can't say for sure at this moment in time that Yevgeny Prigozhin was physically on the plane and is dead.
And Mick, you said that this is most likely no accident.
That's right, Kira. I don't think anybody's surprised that this happened. If in fact Prigozhin was killed on this plane, and possibly Utkin, who is the ops chief, if you will, and the actual founder of Wagner, it may be that the Kremlin was trying to figure out how to continue Wagner operations, which makes quite a bit of money for the Kremlin. They were trying to figure out potentially how to keep that going without them, and this may indicate that they figured it out. But they also may have wanted to have some plausible deniability, because the internal conflict this may cause is something they might want to avoid.
Tom, you know, what we are hearing now is that Prigozhin, you know, as you pointed out, was on the manifest, on the passenger list there. It reminds me of the old adage, when you strike at a king, kill him, because if you don't, you're in trouble. And how do you make what do you make of how this follows that mutiny against the Kremlin? Obviously, it's a powerfully circumstantial evidence, but what was Prigozhin after in that mutiny, and why didn't he finish the job?
Yeah, the line was bad on your question, but I got most of it, Terry. I mean, look, I think you were asking about, the events running up to this. And weeks ago, back in June, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the backstory before then is that Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner fighting force was very active in Ukraine. It was very active around a key eastern city or a key battle that went on for months and months. Many of his men were killed. Yevgeny Prigozhin was going on social media criticizing the Russian Ministry of Defense in a very pointed way, basically going into a kind of public shouting match with very senior figures within the Russian military and the Russian Ministry of Defense. President Putin wasn't stepping into that. He was keeping quiet on that. And then suddenly in June, just as the Russian Ministry of Defense was effectively trying to kind of close down his private military company, his mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin basically launched this rebellion. And he got as far as taking control of a key Russian city, Rostov-on-Don, in the southwest, not that far from Moscow. He was then threatening to march on Moscow. President Putin went on TV and said that the Wagner group, he didn't name Prigozhin at the time personally, but he said the Wagner group were traitors. Then there was a kind of backroom deal, reportedly. We think that Putin, the Kremlin, cut a deal with Wagner and Prigozhin. Then we got reports that Prigozhin had gone off to Belarus. We last saw him popping up in Africa, in Mali. And we thought that Prigozhin had gone back to his old days of running his mercenary group predominantly from Africa. Now we're getting this incident. It appears at the moment that Prigozhin might have met a horrible death. We can't confirm that at this point in time, but I think it's worth, in the sort of sphere of facts and possible disinformation. In Russia, there is a lot of disinformation from official and non-official channels, but a lot of channels at the moment are putting all kinds of theories out there. One is that this was a terrorist incident, that the plane came down because of terrorism. Another is that, reportedly, unconfirmed, the plane was shot down by Russian air defense.
Well, it certainly sends a message, no matter what, to all of Putin's opponents. Tom Sufi Burge and Mick Mulroy, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and we don't know yet. There's no positive identification of these 8 bodies. And looking at the crash site, these bodies would be quite hard to identify because they'll all be mangled up and burned. The Wagner channels have been saying in the last hour, this is their own Telegram channels, have been saying that they are confirming that Prigozhin is dead, along with Dmitry Utkin, who was the deputy, or was the co-founder of Wagner in 2014. Now, that's what some Wagner people are saying, but it's plausible. But it won't be confirmed for quite some time. But this is undoubtedly big news because whatever it does to the war in Ukraine, and in a way the effect on the war will probably be marginal, but it reinforces the fact that Russia is a gangster state. It's run in a gangster way from the top right through to the very bottom, with corruption down at the lowest possible level. And of course, most people are saying in the West, well, if Prigozhin's dead, this has only been a matter of time. He's been a dead man walking since the 24th of June, when this attempted coup seems to have been tried, the march from Rostov on Moscow. And it makes President Putin look very weak, the fact that Prigozhin not only got away with it, but was then transiting between Belarus and Moscow, and he was going back to Moscow. He had a meeting with Putin on the 29th of June, along with 35 of the Wagner rebels, and Putin didn't even get what he wanted at that meeting. So Putin has looked very, very weak. It also, I mean, one learns in these sorts of news times, these immediate events, to be a little bit careful, because many more things come out in the next 24 hours afterwards. Lots of complications, lots of other angles seem to crop up. So we do have to be a little bit careful. But it's not obvious that he's dead at the moment. He probably is, but there's still some plausible idea that this might have been some sort of setup. It's certainly not obvious that Mr. Putin may have had to be behind it. There's any number of people in Moscow among the elite who wanted him dead. There's been rumors for a long time that Timchenko, for instance, Gennady Timchenko, has had a contract out on him for well over a year. That may or may not be true, but these rumors swirl around. Prigozhin only had one friend, really, among the elite, and that was Udoy, a man who was the governor of Tula, who seemed to get on with him as well as Shoigu, the defense minister. But I mean, you know, everybody else in Moscow, all of the elite, all of the people close to Putin detested Prigozhin and thought he was very dangerous. So in that respect, this is not surprising, but lots of detail, I'm sure, other detail, confusing detail, will emerge in the next 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as you say, the devil is in the detail. And for viewers joining us now, we are reporting that there has been a plane crash north of Moscow. These pictures coming into us here at Sky News of that plane tumbling down through the skies over Moscow. And we also brought you the pictures of that crash site. Interestingly, Moscow correspondent Diana Magnay saying that there was also reports of a second plane right behind that one, zigzagging its way through the skies behind it. So there is a lot of intrigue tonight around the plane crash, the nature of this plane crash, whether or not indeed Yevgeny Prigozhin was on board. And of course, President Putin tonight at that concert marking the victory in Kursk, seemingly going about his business as though nothing has really happened.
Yes, I mean, he's in Kursk to mark the great Second World War tank battle of Kursk, the victory at Kursk, which is part of the Russian national picture, as it were, of the Great Patriotic War. And the aircraft footage is quite interesting. Yeah, reports of the two aircraft are in the air. Early reports, they were both Prigozhin's aircraft, and the second one turned back to Moscow after the incident. That may or may not turn out to be true. Lots of speculation that one aircraft may have shot down another aircraft. There's a little bit of supporting evidence for that when we see that the piece of film that we're running now of the aircraft falling out of the sky. I mean, when an aircraft blows up in midair, it doesn't fall out of the sky in a coherent way. It just breaks up and bits fall out of the sky. In this case, when you see the aircraft coming down, it's sort of leafing down. It's like sycamore leafing down, as if it's been hit or some sort of catastrophic failure has taken place in its command system, in its flying controls. So it doesn't, to me, look like an aircraft that had a bomb on board, but it does look like an aircraft that has been hit by something outside, which does enough damage to wreck the control surfaces. And so the aircraft goes into a death dive that the pilots can't do anything about. When you see the way the aircraft comes down, it has that look about it, but you know, I'm only guessing from what we see on the clips that we've been running.
Yeah, and the truth is, Michael, that we may or may not ever get an investigation, because all of this will be in Russia's hands on what information is released. But this certainly reminiscent, I was speaking earlier to Michael Bosicu, who was the OSCE spokesperson and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, who gained access to the crash site of MH17. And we know about Russia's hand behind that too. Let's talk a little, Michael, about President Putin's playbook, so to speak. We know that how he deals with adversaries, he deals with them swiftly and ruthlessly, no matter where they are. Of course, we know about the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, Sergei Skripal, and Boris Bondarev saying to me that this is a far more brutal way of dealing with somebody, if indeed President Putin is behind this. But we have seen MH17 crash too. Yes, I mean, the MH17 crash was created by a Buk missile, a Buk anti-aircraft missile, that was under the control of Gherkin, the man, Strelkov, his real name is, but he called himself Alexander Gherkin, who's now been arrested, incidentally. Nothing to do with this. He was just been arrested for being anti-Kremlin because he's such a Russian nationalist. But the MH17 aircraft was brought down by a missile fired by the separatists in the Donetsk region in 2014, I think it was, wasn't it? And then the other poisonings, Litvinenko and Skripal, and a number of other poisonings around the world. And
thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. We appreciate your support. See you in the next one.